Okay, good morning, everybody. The mornings have been feeling really early the past few weeks. I have had a lot on my plate. So, this week, a bunch of stuff happened. I'm not going to go into all of it in detail. So, the lawsuit I have with the state, I filed my response. Not a whole lot more for me to do. There was a intervener filing that I need to respond to, but that's pretty minimal. And we just wait. We wait to see how it is. There was a primary this week, so I skipped the Tuesday town hall since everybody was all caught up in that. There is a Democratic nominee. It is Sarah Gideon, as was expected. And immediately, of course, Sarah challenged Susan to a series of 5 debates. And Susan says, oh my gosh, how about 16? And the funny thing is, I could understand how some might not consider me a full candidate right now because I am not yet ballot qualified. And because that's litigating, but there's 2 other candidates that are ballot qualified, and they absolutely should be included in any of those debates. So it's going to be interesting to watch and see if they are thoroughly excluded from the debates, and if I'm thoroughly excluded from the debates as well. And certainly I challenge Susan and Sarah, and I'm sure that Lisa and Max join me in let's just all debate. Let's get it out there. Let's let people have a panel and they can contrast our positions and see where we go from there. So I think that we have a lot of opportunities to not just make this a Democrat versus Republican sort of event, but to really contrast positions. For example, one of the things that I have heard lately, or that has been plugged by one of the candidates, is, oh, we should cap insulin prices. And my stance on that is that insulin, frankly, should be at no charge to people as preventative care service. It's a very inexpensive to manufacture pharmaceutical, and the amount of harm in both financial costs from more severe consequences and cost of life, it greatly outweighs the cost of manufacturing and providing that at no charge. And if we can't find businesses to do it, great. I think that what we should look into is, for example, the state of Maine. We have, I see a few people are joining. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the live chat. I'm just kind of catching up on the week. So we have in Maine a lot of manufacturing capacity that's underutilized. We have a lot of mills that are sitting there that could be repurposed. Maine absolutely could be in pharmaceutical manufacturing. So why don't we get some grants going for not-for-profits to manufacture some of these life-saving drugs that, because they're so life-saving and so inexpensive to produce, but so much demand, that there can be a premium attached to them. Why don't we go ahead and get some not-for-profits doing that and have them provide living wages in some of these rural communities that need the help? And we can do that for lots of pharmaceuticals. And I think there'd be a lot of folks really interested in that. I think there's some great possibilities there with maybe tying it into community colleges, tying it into worker retraining programs for folks who are either in decimated industries or maybe folks who have paid their debt to society and they would really like to reintegrate, but there aren't positions available. If you're in something like pharmaceuticals, as long as you're not manufacturing something that would be like an addictive substance and that would be perhaps tempting for somebody who has substance abuse issues to tap into, I think that there's some real possibilities there to provide living wages for people who have a history of criminality, because I think that's one of the challenges. We get caught in the recidivism trap because people get out of jail and they have no viable source of income. So it's very difficult for them to move away from those lifestyles because there's no one will hire them. And that doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. That doesn't mean that they don't have capacity. That doesn't mean that they don't have skills. A lot of people who are trapped in our criminal justice system, particularly in Maine, have a whole bunch of really trivial issues that have just led up to an extensive criminal history. A lot of times when I've been lawyer of the day, people will essentially just plead often to things they haven't done. They will plead guilty just because they have to go pick up kids or they have to get to work, and it's a fine. And in doing that, if they do it a few times, they create a really extensive criminal history for themselves, and suddenly they go from a place where they're living in $100 fines to like jail time, and they can't understand why. It is so easy to get trapped into that, particularly for just really minor or administrative things. The way that we currently administer issues with registrations and paperwork around vehicles it over criminalizes just incredibly trivial things, and things that are incredibly harmful to those that are poor. So I think that I would love to see us talking about issues like that instead of like Democrats, Republicans, and obviously there's a big issue at the federal level with the Republican Party at the federal level being completely dysfunctional and none of their policy being what it should be. But that doesn't mean that the alternative is necessarily the best alternative, is the other party. And in the state of Maine, we have ranked choice voting. So we don't have to say it's blue or red. We can say it's blue or it's red, or you know what? Maybe you both don't meet the threshold of what Maine's looking for. Maybe we want more bold policy choices. Maybe we want more actual leadership. Maybe we want people who are not afraid to say, instead of just capping insulin prices at 10 times what they should be, let's look at a way to make it no charge to people. Let's look at a way to really help people with life-saving drugs. I don't think that we need to compromise in Maine. I think that we're able to put forward problem solvers regardless of the color of cape that they wear. So I think that we really should be, instead of having these head-to-head one-on-one debates, I think we should really be looking at more of a panel feature and how do you want to handle things, and what kind of ideas are you going to take to DC. I haven't really heard much substantive from either the Democrat or Republican about student loans. I mean, good gravy, they should be set to 0% while we're figuring out what we're going to do with them. We are compound interest punishing people who are trying to become some of the most learned in our society to help society, and we're saying, okay, but we're going to put you in debtor's prison for doing that. And that's not acceptable. So I don't see a lot of solutions coming out of either of the major political platforms in this race. From Susan, I see a lot of, oh gosh, I worked super hard for you and I have brought home the bacon. But that's not about policy. That's about fetching jobs and resources. And good policy will provide jobs and resources. Good policy will make it so that it's not all about BIW. And that's not that BIW isn't important. It's that it's one industry and one segment. I grew up in the Seattle area, and I remember how dependent that economy had become on Boeing and how it just devastated us. Anytime that Boeing took a hit, we need to diversify our economies. We need to make them healthier. We need to make them more broad and more deep. And Maine hasn't had a lot of opportunities to do that. So, and Maine is not unique in that. That is something that applies across the board, that we really need to be making our economies more deep, more broad, more complex, so that they are more resilient. And I don't see policy coming out from either side about that. This race cannot just be I'm not Susan, because we have multiple I'm not Susan candidates. It has to be, what are we going to do once we're there? And it has to be talking about student loans. It has to be talking about what are we going to be doing with healthcare. I don't like having the debate around healthcare be about insurance, which is to some extent what Medicare for All makes it. I want to make it about healthcare. I don't want to worry about insurance. I want to worry about how we're going to deliver healthcare to Americans. So, what are we going to do about healthcare? What are we going to do about a lot of the constitutional issues that are coming up? We've seen this week in Portland, Oregon, not Maine, that we have um, some federal forces that have entered Oregon without the governor, without the city asking, and they're just sort of making um, their own determinations outside of what would traditionally be considered legal, and they're just arresting people, putting them in unmarked cars. Like that's we need to be having conversations about that. We need to be having conversations about police brutality. We need to be having conversations about systemic injustice and racism. We need to be having conversations about what we want our law to be structurally. And that is just getting so lost. And it is understandable why that is getting lost in races where it really is a blue or red choice. But that's not Maine. We don't need to be having that conversation. I think we can have a conversation where, Susan's going to make an argument that her political stances are good for the economy. I don't agree. I don't agree that there's an awful lot of press releases that go with making her look good, but there's not a lot of substance there. There's not a lot of moving the law to a space that's functional. There's a lot of hemming and hawing over self-inflicted tragedies that we've been given. But I mean, if we start from the space where, I just don't think Collins is a good place in the future for Maine. I think we need to be moving away from that methodology that she has been using to get elected for so many years. That still leaves us with Sarah, Lisa, Max, and me. And that is 4 different ideologies to pick from. And we're all going to have things that we agree or disagree on. We're all going to have different mechanisms and methodologies, but it doesn't just have to be, it's either Susan or not Susan in those your choices. That is not what Maine has. So I hope that we are moving forward. We're really looking at more diverse ideas and more diverse opinions. I hope that we're looking at structural change, not just I'm not that. I hope we're looking at meaningful change, and I hope that we're questioning the moves as to whether or not they're too trivial. Capping medical costs at 10 times what they should be, that's too trivial. That is not meaningful to the average American. That's not meaningful to people who are vulnerable, poor. That is not meaningful. So if we're capping prices on things at more than what people can afford, that's not helpful at all. That is an excellent way to say that I have taken the energy from this and given it some sort of a home. I've taken the energy from this issue and given it a home in my marketing. And now that it's been addressed, I don't feel like I have to go back and make it better. And that's not good enough. And what I want everybody in Maine to be looking at is how do we make our policy not just incrementally better, but good enough? It doesn't have to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect policy, but how do we make it better in a way that is meaningful, not just incrementally better? And of course, if incrementally better is all that's available, you grab it. But you also should be really, truly striving to do things that help the average person. And I really want to stay away from the Maine race being 2 very wealthy people that argue about what they think might make people who are middle class and poor happier, because I don't think that either one of them really has the frame of reference to know what impacts people. And you can see that by their legislative background. They're just the legislative background of the 2 front runners in this race is just incredibly shallow, which is shocking for the amount of years it's been going. Susan Collins has been in office for decades, and her legislative accomplishments are so shallow, so trivial, so focused on meaningless legislation that can be called bipartisan because it doesn't mean anything to either side, or it means so little that all you've really voted for there is a title. That's just not good law. So I'm going to keep going with 2 town halls a week, the Tuesday town hall and Breakfast with Tiffany through the election, or until a court says that I am no longer a candidate. I would like to see us do more panel type events, debate type events with all the candidates. You will see me pushing back a lot on media and other candidates about that. And I think that you're going to see something that you wouldn't see in other races. So if you look at Lisa, Max, and I, we have 3 very divergent ideologies. There are certainly things we could pick that we have in common. We can all say we appreciate and respect diversity of opinions. We can all say that we think that a race should include all candidates that are ballot qualified. But you'll find that, Max is, I'm probably a little bit closer to Lisa than Max on a lot of policy things. But what you'll see is you'll see three candidates that are willing to say, look, we know our ideas are different. We know we fall different places on the political spectrum, but we also think that the people who support us should have the opportunity to see who else they might want to rank. And the people who support us should have the opportunity to see who they might want to rank second, and what ideas really do and don't work. And I think when you're contrasting those ideas, even if they're very far apart on the spectrum, what you're doing is you're both reinforcing whether or not your ideology is what you want, and you're looking at, are there aspects of different political ideology that can be pulled over to create a more comprehensive plan. So I'm the only attorney in the race. And one of the things that I like about lawyers and the way that we do our work is, in politics, conflict has been used to fundraise. And that's generally not how it's used as an attorney. Conflict is used as an attorney and in the law substantially more to say, well, I'm teasing out your worst arguments and I'm showing you your best arguments. And that can be applied to policy too. When I collaborate with other attorneys, so I'm a family law attorney, we essentially create law that's customized and personalized for families that are reconfiguring. So though we're not necessarily writing a statute, what we're doing is we're writing an individual set of laws that govern that household, even though it's now separated into two households. And a lot of times that collaboration, we actually end up coming up with ideas that are way better than either party would have come up with. Just like in America, where we have to put something bigger than our client's interests first. If I'm separating out a household with children, our job is, even though we want to put our client's interests first, our client's best interest is also don't screw up your kids. And that's very similar to writing federal law or any law really. You might have your priority and what you think is best, but overall, the biggest thing is, but don't screw up the effing country. And unfortunately, we have people there right now that they seem so polarized and so concerned with their point of view that what we've gotten is, essentially Republicans have gotten to this very strange place where apparently human rights don't exist. And Democrats are saying, hey, we generally do value human rights and these things are really important. But instead of it being, hey, we both value human rights and let's look at these different positions and how we can, work together to see how we can put human rights as something that's on the forefront and maybe come up with something that better than either one of us have come up with, where we can troubleshoot the flaws that either one of the sides have come up with. It's just become a place where our options are no human rights or like human rights light. And that's not where we should be. That's not where we should be with policy. We should be applying the methodology that we see more among lawyers, where we're using conflict to come up with something that's better than what either side came up with individually. So I hope that we're both looking at a spectrum of beliefs and including all the candidates. And I hope that we're using this process that we are very fortunate to have in Maine. Ranked choice voting is something that Maine worked hard for. We most certainly, it was a fight to get it in. It's a fight to continue to implement it. It still doesn't apply to like the gubernatorial race, which is weirdly and sort of poetically a dark comedy, since that's the reason why we have it. And so, we have ranked choice voting. So in the state of Maine, we don't have to say, our options are inadequate or sort of adequate. We have the ability to say, let's look at the full spectrum and say who we really want to have represent us, so that we don't end up in a situation where we're sending forward candidates that, either do nothing or do totally trivial legislation, or we're sending forward candidates that, oh my gosh, they're going to do photo op type things where they do something that's not helpful in a meaningful way. I mean, it is astonishing if you take out some of the messaging how similar the marketing is in all of the commercials, regardless of who the candidate is. And we need to get away from that. We need to get away from the really polished, even using the same voiceover actor commercials, and move to substance. So ranked choice voting is an excellent excuse and an excellent vehicle to move us to a space where our campaigns and our elections are not red versus blue. They are, what is the substance, what is the quality, and what do we want to put forward? So I really encourage you all, if you are in Maine, take advantage of that. If you aren't in Maine, push for voting system changes like ranked choice voting so that we can be looking at substance instead of how much money we can spend. We want to run elections, not auctions. We want to make sure that we have people working on the laws that are making our laws what they should be. So I haven't gotten any questions this morning. I am not functionally caffeinated enough the last couple of weeks. I will see you online, and I will see you back Tuesday. You will see me challenging other candidates to be in those panels. I'm not sure what date or time. I'm working on coordinating with campaigns to see what's going to work the best for everyone. So let me know if you have any questions. I'll be back on Tuesday. And in the meantime, you can always find me on social media. Take care of yourselves, and we'll talk soon.